we create a lot of garbage. Think about the amount of garbage that goes into your garbage can every week at home, or even every day at school. Today we're going to learn about 3 ways to limit the amount of garbage that we create. Those 3 ways are our 3 R's: reducing, reusing, and recycling. Your job today is to make sure you know the difference between those 3 R's. The first R is reduce. This is great. This means that you don't make garbage in the first place. For example, if you make a hamburger at home, there's not a ton of garbage. But if you go to McDonald's, just look at this picture and see how much garbage would be created by one meal. If you avoid going to McDonald's and make a burger at home, you don't have that garbage in the first place, and that's an example of reducing. The next of the 3 R's is reusing. This is when you use the same item again. For example, if you drink coffee out of a coffee mug, you're using that item every day that week. That way you don't have to use styrofoam cups to go in the garbage, and that item is being used over and over. Another example is using a metal fork instead of plastic forks. That fork can be used again and again, which is why it is an example of reusing. The last example is recycling. This is when the item is changed from something old into something new and has to be used through machines. You can recycle objects such as plastic, paper, and aluminum. For example, plastic can be taken and processed and made into AstroTurf, which is the field that the Saints play on. Recycling is great when you have plastic, paper, and aluminum garbage, but it also requires a lot of energy to collect and to change the materials into their new products. In order to make sure you know which of the 3 R's you're using, there's a few quick questions you can ask yourself. If machines are involved, it's going to be recycling. If you're using an old object again, but there's not machines, that's going to be reusing. And if you don't have that garbage, that waste in the first place, that is reducing. Make sure you understand how to know the difference between the 3 R's, because we're going to practice using a few real-world examples. The first example, using a coffee mug again and again. Is this an example of recycling, reusing, or reducing? This is an example of reusing, because you're taking a coffee mug one day and you're able to use it the next day and the next day. The next example, buying a whole apple like the one on the left instead of packaged apple slices like the one on the right. Is this an example of recycling, reusing, or reducing? This is an example of reducing. If you buy the whole apple, you don't have that packaging in the first place, so there's no garbage. In fact, that apple core, when you're done eating, can be decomposed and turned back into a natural resource. The next example is remelting aluminum into new aluminum cans. Think about which 3 R this is. This is an example of recycling. Old aluminum is being turned into new aluminum, and this is done by machines. We got a few more. Hopefully this is making sense for you. If it's not, don't be afraid to go back to the beginning of the video to make sure you understand what you need to know for today's lesson. Our next one, putting paper into blue bins to be made into new paper. This is recycling. Our key word is new paper. Whenever we turn something old into something new by machines, that is an example of recycling. Next example. Is this an example of recycling, reusing, or reducing? Bringing a cloth bag to the grocery store. This is an example of reusing. You're able to bring that same bag to the grocery store every time you go. That way you don't have the paper or plastic garbage if you didn't bring that cloth bag. Our last example, buying a 2-liter of Fanta instead of a 6-pack of Fanta. Is this an example of recycling, reusing, or reducing? This is an example of reducing because you are choosing to buy a 2-liter, which only has 1 container of garbage, versus a 6-pack, which would have 6 cans that you have to throw away. Yes, there's still stuff and waste that's created, but the 2-liter has less waste or garbage than the 6-pack. So you are reducing or shrinking the amount of garbage that you created. Hopefully you have a great handle on how to tell the difference between the 3 R's. If you are still confused, please go back to the beginning of the video or go back to the practice problems to make sure you're ready to pass today's Prove It.